Chad, Owen, guys, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, really good to have you. So thanks for joining us. What I really wanted to do, guys, is just sort of get into a little bit about sort of how you guys, first of all, how you guys came together as a group. So also as a production duo. So if you could give us just a little bit of your backstory and how you guys sort of found each other and started producing together, would really love to hear how that sort of came about.
Do you want to take this one, Owen?
Sure, yeah. So we actually met each other probably 4 years ago, I think, maybe just over.
16,
and we were in the middle of India in a place called Hampi. So we were both traveling separately from each other.
Okay.
Doing, having a couple of months out, doing a bit of traveling, things like that, seeing an amazing country. And at one of the stops there, we both happened to stay at the same hostel.
Yep.
And bumped each other and just had, got on, spent a week together, I think. It was about 4 or 5 days maybe. That time, just going around exploring the sites. Having a great time.
Yep.
And in that time, Chad mentioned about, I think at the time you weren't living in Bristol, but you were talking about moving to Bristol.
No, I mean, like, I was living in Bristol, but when I'd moved back to England, I had to move back to my parents for a few months to make some money to then, save up so I could move back to Bristol again.
So the discussions about Bristol happened essentially while we were there, and then we parted ways after we left the hostel. And then just coincidentally, I ended up moving to Bristol with my girlfriend about maybe a year later, or about 9 months later or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a fair while, and I just dropped Chad a message, say, "Hey, are you still about? Is it you in Bristol with that?" And we just caught up, probably over some falafel and hummus at Eater Pitta. I'm not sponsored, but they are great.
Okay.
And just caught up over that, and then chat about music and production and things like that. And
so had you guys both been producing independently prior to that, and that's what you guys sort of bonded over when you first met each other, and that's where these first conversations started from? How did you both first start music production, or had you not done any prior to that?
Well, more so like Owen than me, but like I've always like produced in my bedroom sort of thing, not on Owen's kind of level. Owen, like he'll probably tell you in a minute, he has many different solo projects apart from Cando that he does. And for me, like I'm not great technically on DAWs.
Okay.
But I know how to make a basic, a basic beat. I know how to like input basic ideas in. And where Owen comes in is like he refines those ideas and makes them into something just quite beautiful. But I want to backtrack on to the story of how we met, because it's actually quite funny. So my perspective on that is like Owen said, we met in India in Hampi, and I had seen him before on the route before Hampi, but like hadn't said anything at all. I hadn't said hi or anything. But then because we were in the same concentrated area, I saw him walking around with like this piece of hardware called an OP1. And I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And it was like always
teenage engineering in it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was walking around with like my drum, and I was like just asking him questions about this OP1 and blah blah blah. And he mentioned like he's a producer and he produces some tunes and blah blah. And then he showed me one of his productions that he made, which is kind of completely non-Cando sounding at all. Like it sounds nothing like Cando, but it's called Brown Biscuit. And it's quite similar to, I don't know if you remember Duck Sauce's Big Bad Wolf tune, about 10 years old.
Yeah, I mean, it was a banger. Duck Sauce was huge. Yeah. It was one of those like kind of, huge ravey bangers that would have played at the festivals and that, Yeah,
it was quite funny and just quite like, balls out, kind of no care in the world sort of thing. And like, I just found Owen's tune very like honest and just fun, and I saw like a lot of potential, and like the production quality was great. And it's just a fun tune. Sometimes I still listen back to it and just like smile, because it's like kind of almost cheesy but done in a really like professional way. And from there I was like, oh my god, like let's work together. And because like I focused more of my sound on drums. That same drum that I spoke about, I was walking around with in India. I took it to Owen's house when we met up in Bristol, and we started just recording like me playing the drums, and loads of other random bits and bobs in Owen's studio. In one of our tracks, his girlfriend was eating a packet of crisps, and yeah, we just recorded all of those sounds, and yeah, that was pretty much it. That was kind of the start, before Cando was even like an established thing, I suppose. You know, we were just making music and practicing, working with each other, learning about each other. And yeah, that was pretty much the start of it.
That's really, really interesting, and you know, Owen, I want to dig into your kind of backstory, because from the sounds of things, it seems like, Chad, you're the kind of, you come from a sort of less, as you say, a less technical background. However, you've been producing for quite a long time with a heavy focus on like percussion and rhythm and drumming. So before we get to you, Owen, Chad, I'd love to just understand your beginnings of production. When you first started, what were you doing? Was it just literally, was it Fruity Loops? What were you doing? How did you start recording? What was the absolute basics, and what was it that kickstarted you to start wanting to make your own and record on your own?
It was exactly that. It was Fruity Loops, like everybody else. You know, like I was 14 at the time. I'd moved from Trinidad to England for the first time when I was 13 years old.
Yep.
And you know, going to school around that time, when like I'm 30 now. So that would have been in like 2004 or 5 or something. And like when I first moved to the UK, I was hearing grime and garage for the first time. So a lot of Digital Rascal and Wiley, and you know, like all of that early stuff. So that was a big influence on me, and I feel like I have always kind of based my musical output on deprivation, in terms of, okay, this tune sounds cool, but I think it would sound better with this if this drop was over here, or if it had a hi-hat there, or if like the snare was placed in a different way or shaped differently. So like due to that deprivation, I started trying to replicate these songs, and like in my own way, and just ended up mistakenly creating something else. Do you know what I mean? So that was it for me. That was the basics. Like 14 years old, just starting off with Fruit Loops, writing rubbish kind of music, but the ideas were kind of there.
Yep. Amazing. And what were there any musical projects that you had, or that you realized to any sort of way that you were proud of prior to forming Cando, and what you're doing now? What are some of the other projects that you've managed to kind of realize?
I worked with a friend of mine called Tommy, FKA Taser. You know, like he's a house guy.
Okay.
So we both went to the same school. We're both from Oxford. And he wrote this, I suppose his biggest tune around that time would have been called Wet Dollars. But we worked together quite a lot. And there's just some, I don't know, you could probably find it online somewhere. It's like Taser and CPL, which is my initials, Chad Peter Lioto. And yeah, we just made some kind of like house stuff, but kind of every time I worked with him, I would try to force him to be more experimental, but he always played it very safe, and he stayed in his lane, and he's become very successful because of that. Fair play.
Yeah.
But I'd say like that was my kind of early introduction to, you know, the music scene, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Officially.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So we're definitely going to come to sort of Cando and how you guys are kind of making music now. But Owen, I'd love to sort of hear from you. What's your sort of musical background and upbringing, and where have you come from to get you to the point that you are now as sort of like the technically, you know, the more technical of the two?
I guess a kind of musical background is based in I played brass instruments. I played kind of learned, you know, did grades on several instruments, things like that. So very traditional kind of childhood of that sort of music. Probably like leaving school, I was just interested in the idea of what a producer was. At that time, I kind of, you know, looked up to the Quincy Jones, say, of producers, and it was, to me, I didn't really understand what their role was in in the making of music. They were kind of just this figure that might sit on the sofa at the back of the studio and kind of, you know, point at things and tell, you know, have this vision or something, or way of guiding music. I just found that kind of fascinating, but also at the same time, FL, or Fruity Loops as it was at the time, FL Studio now, was kind of the starting block of production in terms of doing that. And then I kind of discovered electronic artists like Madian, Knife Party, Pendulum. Similar all around that time of electronics, and kind of merging that with my idea of what a producer was before, with like a more modern take in terms of like, you know, merging sound engineer and other skill sets into kind of one person, and doing all of that yourself on a DAW. That just kind of just seemed great, really. That just seemed pretty amazing. So from that point, I was pretty much hooked, got onto Logic, got your first Mac, and then got into Logic, as kind of lots of people seem to do, I'm sure. Studied music, A-level and uni, and things like that, and just continued just thinking, well, this is this sort of, you know, production, trying to provide as much as possible in terms of sound engineering, production, songwriting. Just seeing the most interesting route. And so since then, since finishing a course of like music production, kind of signed a management and publishing deal, have just been writing music nonstop since then, really. That was kind of a pivot point. So
that's incredible. So it's now a full-time role, a full-time gig for you. It's just
this is my only job, which is great.
Wow.
Love it, really.
Yeah, see, you're the kind of person that really, really intimidates me and makes me think that's the path that I should have taken when I was sort of like 14 years old, thinking that I should start making beats. I'll be like, so I don't want to make this about me, but I remember when I was a kid, my parents got me piano lessons, and I enjoyed piano lessons for about, I would say, 5 years. But then I wasn't picking up sight reading. I wasn't picking up melody. I still had to sight read. I couldn't sight read. It was just really, really difficult for me to navigate around a piano. And then I sat down behind a drum kit, and playing drums and just rhythm became way more interesting to me. So I gave up melody altogether and just focused on rhythm. And there's a big part of me that, you know, regrets, because I feel as though when you're writing music and making music, that's a skill set that you really should have. However, having looked at you know, watching videos online, I see that Ableton Push now exists, which can basically just eliminate the need for you to actually navigate around the keys, and you can just set it as a, you know, as a thing on the, you know, on the thing to actually start just picking up and making music. So I guess what I'm getting at, guys, is do you feel, or Owen, I think you might be a good person to ask this question to, do you think that having a background in music theory and knowledge is essential these days for people wanting to pick up and start making music?
Well, I'd say absolutely not essential, because as you say, like the Push, I've got a Push right here. And, you know, they're great. They're great fun. I mostly just use it to press like play and pause, I'll be honest. Like the one button gets 99% of the use, and occasionally use the rest of them, but it's a lot of fun. And like theory and all that stuff helps, but really, you know, you can't be good at everything. Even if you're doing music production, you can't be good at every, like, ultimately you have your pros and cons of whatever you're doing. So, you know, if you're focused on kind of the drums, the rhythmic aspects and stuff, then really that's, you know, a huge plus. And then, you know, there's so much support now in terms of, you know, MIDI plugins that can help you come up with interesting chords. Even like, you know, definitely don't shun any sort of like preset use or you know, things like that. MIDI packs, you know, they're all valuable in their own right, and they can all make like a unique and original sounding song if you just kind of interpret them in the correct way, or like
am I going mental, or was there a massive influx of people just releasing MIDI chord packs advertised on YouTube for a while there, and where the hell did that come from?
Well, from people loving the Push and doing that, but just wanting some awesome chords to like layer over the beats and stuff. I don't know, it's more accessible than ever, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chad, what's your sort of go-to these days? What's your production setup looking like?
My production setup is basically Owen's production setup, to be honest. I have I have Owen and I have identical DAWs, I suppose, and like I got it because of him. I have Owen's Dell. We have the same laptop, everything.
Wow.
So I'll kind of like write stuff on there, but more so I think our production starts from just me ringing Owen up or just annoying him, just messaging him some like random samples, like, oh my God, we need to make something that sounds like this. Like, I have no idea how to do it, but I know you know how to do it. So like sometimes
Yeah. That's amazing. It's like, I've got an idea. Go make that happen. That sounds great.
yeah. So like we'll kind of sit down in the studio together, and I'll like I could give you an example with our Livity Sound, the first record that we made, Bleak. I remember driving to Owen's house. He lived in Hereford in Wales at the time. Is that Wales, Owen? Or is it
On
just
the border.
Hereford? On the border, right?
Yeah,
It's like it's in that territory.
Yep.
And I was driving to Owen's because we were going to write for a few days, and for some reason I was listening. That one of the tunes I sent you, that Sizzler tune. It's called That's Why. I messaged you. You asked me for a list of 5 songs
Yes.
that kind of epitomizes our music or where the inspiration comes from.
Yep.
And I was listening to that song just on the way to Owen's house, and there's like a particular part in it where Sizzler says, like, there's a kind of riff in melody of his vocal, and he says something like my love, my life, my life, my life, it is built up on your trust. And then that little part, that split second, just stuck in my head, and it kept on repeating itself for some reason. It's like, my life, my life, my life, my life. And when I got to Owen's house, I was like, man, I just can't get this thing out of my head. I don't know why. And I played him the tune, and like I tried to, like do it on the piano and on Owen's keyboard. I think it's that one behind you. It might be the Prophet that we use actually. So I tried to play the key on there, and it was like, great. So he quantized everything. We had that small split second section, and then we were like, shit, like, okay, this is just like 1.5 seconds or 2.5 seconds of melody. We need to put something either at the start or the end of it to kind of like fuse it. And I was kind of thinking, okay, what do we do? And one of my friends, Brady Via Maris, he's known as, he had sent me a tune called Toys that got released on one of Beneath's label, and that had a really interesting synth line. And I think it starts, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. It could probably fit with this middle section of this tune, blah, blah, blah. So we kind of added that to the middle section, and we're like, okay, good. We've got a start and a middle, but we don't have an end, and I don't really know where to go with this. Mm-hmm. And like I just said to Owen, like, should we just go up the chords? Just, so yeah, that was it. So then in the end, Bleak's kind of sounded like start, and then the middle was which came from Sizzler, and then at the end it just kind of ascended, and yeah, that was it.
Wow.
So that's kind of that's how my brain works, and it's just trying to convey that to Owen and like articulate that to Owen, and he probably thinks, oh my God, this guy's fucking crazy. But that's generally how every Cando production works, pretty much. That's how we write all of our songs. I will come to Owen with an idea and be like, okay, like I've got this in my head, let's try to put it down in Ableton. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's in it. Like you'll find samples, find rhythms, anything from like an Instagram story or something to YouTube clips and things to rip.
Wow.
An advert, like car adverts
and stuff. Yeah, all with no copyright, obviously, but they're all fine to it, and they would just get those sorts of ideas, or just they'll inspire something, that sort of rhythm, and then it will be going on that. And then as we're working on something, Chad will have references of like, oh, this song to listen to, this song direction, or what about like a synth line that kind of is from here, but the tom pattern that's from this song or something, and it's just kind of pulling in a dozen references and then trying to tie it all together.
Yeah, but like I think it's quite interesting with me and Owen because we're both from different musical backgrounds, and Owen, like when we met each other for the first time anyway, might be a little bit different now. He wasn't familiar with any of the kind of music that we make together, or anybody else like Batu or Livity Sound or like any of those guys, Owen was not familiar with at
okay.
all. So he had no sort of reference point or any inclination of what the music should sound like, which I found very interesting.
So what were you listening to at the time, Owen? What was your sort of, where was your head at, if you like? Because my head's deeply in that world and has been since like the early days of dubstep, or as early as I could get into dubstep. You know, obviously I wasn't born in Croydon, so I didn't know it when it came out. But where was your head at?
So a lot of just a different world of like electronic music, I think. So there's like a handful of like kind of French DJs like Madian, Lido, Leno, they like kind of produce a sort of French house and dance music. I guess that was where I was kind of interested in sort of production wise, as you're saying. But apart from that, I'd come from I suppose fairly like classical background. So was happy to listen to a Mendelssohn violin concerto, or to for uni we'd have to listen to an album of noise music, or like John Cage and all this kind of more experimentalist stuff, which wasn't rhythm based at all, or like Pierre Schaeffer, or like some sort of train track for 10 minutes, and that was just kind of a mishmash. But apart from that, in my downtime it'd mostly just be the Radio 1, Radio 6 music. It wasn't
and for me, it was the whole Croydon thing. It was just Scream, Benga, Marla, Quest. Like, it was all of that. So, like, every time we sit down, like, I'm quite aware that Owen isn't clued up on that side of things and the kind of music that we make. So, like, we used to start our sessions by, like, the first hour, we'll just sit down and listen to music, and I'd be like, okay, this is the kind of feeling that I want to portray in this project. So we'll just sit down and just go through a bunch of music, Batu, Scream, Bruce, like indie music as well, or like whatever else.
Amazing.
So, I'd show him a lot of Trinidadian music that I grew up with, like a lot of dancehall that I grew up with. So that's kind of what I think the Cando project is based on, is those kind of sounds. And although Owen didn't grow up with that side, luckily he grew up with the technical side, learning the technical side of things. So like it creates this like beautiful fusion.
Absolutely. No, it's because I mean, a lot of the UK-based music culture around Croydon, they didn't really know what they were doing when they were making these beats. They were just fans of jungle, fans of garage, making a mashup of the two, and then just figuring it out as they went. And Chad, I'm definitely getting the vibe that that's exactly the kind of ethos that you're bringing to it as well. It's like, I'm not really I know that this is good. I know that I really like this, and I know I want to make some of it of my own. And having Owen there as a kind of sounding board to be like, okay, I can actually make this happen. That's a really good marriage. And obviously, Owen, for yourself, it must be a bit of an education that all this sort of like amazing electronic music, hopefully now you think it's amazing, is being made, right in your backyard. The UK is the home to, coming from Australia myself, and being raised in like a Catholic family in the suburbs, I remember when I first heard Breathe by The Prodigy, that like just the sound of that was like, I couldn't believe it. Like just the sound that was coming out of the speakers blew me away. And ever since then, I feel like I've just been chasing UK electronic music culture. And like, that's what's brought me over here, is to be closer to it and to hopefully find a career in it somehow, So yeah, there's amazing music being made.
Owen is so funny, down to the point of like, when Bev got in touch with us for like our Livity Sound record and blah blah blah, like I was like, oh my god, like I'm freaking out.
He's a legend.
yeah, absolutely. And I know this, but like Owen has no idea who he is. I was like, yeah, oh my god, Owen, Pevless, blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, cool, I suppose. Like, let's give him the record, Like, and it's just like this, the nonchalance of it is just like, it's so blasé, like like ducks back, it just doesn't bother him, it doesn't faze him, and I think like that's incredible.
I just didn't know anything. We just he was a lovely guy. We met up, we had some pasta I think once at the pub, and that was really nice. But I just Do you have anything else to add, Ree?
Yeah, I guess in this world, I guess there's a lot of reverence for the kind of legends of those early days of the scene. And, I work with a guy, Chad, you might know him. His name's Darkside. He runs Get Darker, which is like the dubstep.
Get Darker.
Do you remember Get Darker TV?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so he runs that. I work with him, and like he tells me stories of hanging out with Distance and N-Type and all these guys. And to me, these were the international headliners when I was living in Sydney. And it's just like to hear that. Oh yeah, he's my mate. We go for curry. I was just like, what on earth are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I freak out about Owen because he has no idea who any of these people are. Like he just. And I think there's like an accidental sort of mystery or created with Owen, because no one actually knows who Owen is. Like you'll never really see us together that much anymore because we live in different parts of England at the moment anyway.
Yep.
So he's not really around in Bristol. So everyone's just kind of like, who's this Owen guy? And like, he's kind of became mysterious accidentally.
Is it? Well, it's lovely to. Well, I feel
just right now getting both of us together right now. This is very rare because I can't even get an interview with Owen. It takes me about 2 or 3 months for us to set up.
No, it's
book it in.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because obviously, Chad, you're well into this music and you're well into the scene, and you're what's plugged Cando into the kind of bass music community. Whereas Owen, you live and breathe music production day in, day out. What's some of the other stuff you're working on right now outside of the Cando project?
So it's mostly like production, songwriting and stuff, top lines and everything for just other artists. So it's pitching for briefs. So a lot is pop music really.
Oh wow.
Dance music, in terms of like more mainstream like house and things like that. And then bits of like K-pop and J-pop. So it's really just a whole field. So, when coming back to a session, that's why it takes a little bit of Chad playing some different music and seeing, what sort of direction it is, because my head's all over the place. I've got no bias or filter for what's appropriate in this genre. So it's a bit like, I'll normally put something down and Chad's got like an encyclopedia of references and knowledge, so he'll just be like, nope, that's already happened in a song, here it is in YouTube. Go to like 1 minute 47 in this clip and there it is, they've used that sound, so we'll ditch that, we're not going to use it. So we can't like do that. So yeah, to be honest, it's much more commercial pop and dance background really of
no, absolutely. So I want to ask about K-pop and J-pop for a second. So how do you get plugged into those scenes? That's fascinating.
So they're huge markets. There's loads of amazing bands and stuff, and they release a lot of physical still. So that's something that is shared with those scenes. And they, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to answer that question.
No, sorry, not so much. Not so much. How do you get plugged into it? But like, I guess, if there's such a big market for it, are they constantly on the lookout for songs? Are you submitting to agencies? Are you just making it off your own back? Are there sort of like, is there a tender process? I don't know. What's the sort of...
So there's just, acts become so big, they start they create their own style, as they would, and then they'll generate briefs of what sort of music they're after, what direction the next album's going to be. That'll be like distributed among kind of publishers or other managements and things like that, and then whichever ones kind of end up in front of in your email inbox, you can kind of tackle whichever ones you choose to and send back. And sometimes they won't, sometimes they'll take it, sometimes they will want changes, other times they'll ignore it, and you'll kind of send it on to someone else and see if you can find a home for the music. But they're just there's so much music in the world that and nowadays it just doesn't seem any reason to like stick to the where you geographically are based. There's no real reason to only make music for your local vicinity or like to limit that. So apart from obviously some translation of lyrics, it's very relatable and similar.
And they do say that
the genre tropes.
Yeah, I did do a bit of music industry study back in Australia, and one of the things that they always told us is that the songwriter obviously makes the most of anyone within the in music industry process. So focusing as songwriter, you'll always retain that royalty and that always retain that sort of commission if it ever becomes successful.
Yeah, definitely. I think, nowadays it's mostly the master that's valuable. So really the artist, the performer, I suppose, is generating most income in terms of, streaming. Streaming has pretty much removed most money from the publishing side, from the songwriting side.
Right.
I think it's about 13 times the amount is in the master side from like a stream on Spotify. So
yep.
If it just depends on the where the music's going. So if it's been played loads in clubs, on the radio, then there's money for a songwriter in that. If it's just getting streamed on Spotify and it's kind of a digital release, then it's mostly for the artist, I suppose. So but it's just a balance. There's fees and everything that make it viable for hopefully as many parties as involved as possible.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's the music industry is a tough one because a lot of the people that are sort of trying to make money in it, it's never been easier to start making music, but it's never been harder to make a career from music. At least that's how I'm sort of seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's it's more accessible than ever, but even harder to stand out. So
that's exactly it. So what's next for Cando? So what's next for you guys? What's the plan? You've obviously had, I think, 2 of your own releases as well as on the new compilation for Livity. So I think that's 3 releases on Livity, if I'm not mistaken.
2 releases on Livity.
Yeah.
2 on Chatroom, 1 on Pressure Dome. And that's the catalog. Oh, actually, Paratheon with Henry Greenleaf as well, Owen.
Yeah.
So we did a remix for Henry Greenleaf.
Nice.
I did a remix for Sorab on the Chatroom, and then obviously we've just had our full-length EP on the Chatroom. The first, our debut was obviously Livity Sound, and then the compilation on Livity Sound. So there's all of those bodies of work. I think that's 5 projects, 5 or 6. I don't know. And what's next is don't know if we can talk about it too much, but we're kind of doing like a self-release project more so.
Okay.
But yeah, we're just kind of like working on like trying to work independently now for a little while before giving our music to other labels and stuff, because it doesn't really fit on labels or on other labels in the way that we would want it to be presented.
Okay.
So yeah, we're gonna, our next project is going to be a solo project basically.
Amazing. Do you think mainly released via Bandcamp, or is the ideas are still percolating, still being formed?
The ideas are still developing, but it will be definitely released via Bandcamp.
Yeah, that's my favorite platform. They release everything via FLAC, and most of the money goes to the artists. I absolutely love it. That's amazing. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm not going to keep you too much longer. I do want to just quickly ask you one last quick question from me. What advice would you give me as someone who I've made 2 tunes in my life. Both were on Fruity Loops when I was about 15, 16. I'm now 33, so I've lost over a decade of not producing music because I've been too scared to pick it up. I think I'm going to go for the Ableton Push 2. I've got some money in the bank. I'm just going to go for it, get Ableton and start and go in. Is there anything that you think I should either avoid? Is there any advice you can give? What would you say to someone like me in my position about to embark on this journey?
I think like both Owen and I will give you 2 completely different answers. I'll let Owen go first.
Okay. I think if you get the Push 2 and you've got Ableton set up, then it's very tactile. You can kind of just experiment, play, and I think a good starting point to like get back into stuff is really just to kind of get something you like, pick a song that you love already, drag that into Ableton, see like the structure and the kind of how the energy transfers throughout the song, where more traditionally if it's like verse pre-chorus, but in instrumentals, just where the drops, where the breaks are, and really just kind of emulate it as a starting point and just create something that follows that pattern. And as soon as you mute the original track and you play yours, whatever, obviously it'll sound completely different. It won't sound anything like the original. But, you know, it's just to like, you know, I think everyone just starts out as copycats really. And then you kind of copy 100 different things. And suddenly if you've done all that, it's not plagiarism. It's just kind of your influences. So to get back in, it's just, you know, do something you enjoy, experiment.
And plagiarize a bit, but not too much.
Yeah.
I would say get feedback from people who are not yes men and people who aren't gonna like bullshit you. You know, if show it to people who would give you like very good constructive criticism, even if they tell you like, no, this isn't good because of this XYZ, and it could be better because of this XYZ. Do you know what I mean? So like when Owen and I first started, we were literally just practicing. Even that Livity Sound record, that was us practicing. It kind of got released by accident, pretty much, on a very big label. And that was us practicing, learning how to work with each other. We would send our stuff. I lived with Omar Batu at the time whilst making that record. And I would like sit down with him and show him all my stuff, and he'd give me really good feedback, and I'd send it to him and people like Bruce and Hodge and all of these guys, and they would always get back in touch saying like, okay, well, you can work on this and you could work on that, and etc. So you just need very honest people around you to kind of like push you in the right direction. I would say
having a network of people that are going to give you honest feedback.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Watch lots of YouTube videos.
That's
always helpful.
Well, believe it or not, in 15 minutes, I'm interviewing Ned Rush, who's one of my YouTube icons for production. So guys, I've reached the last minute of my Zoom plan. It's been amazing chatting to you. Thank you so much. Guys, if you're listening, all the links are going to be in the description of this YouTube video. Go check out Cando, Owen, Chad. It's been a bloody pleasure. Thank you so much, guys.
Brilliant. Awesome. Great to talk. Thank you.
You too. Cheers.
Take care.
Hello, legend. Thank you so much for watching all the way till the end. If you like that, I got a ton more of these interviews being uploaded constantly on the YouTube page. And I do a weekly mix on Mixcloud every Saturday. So if you can subscribe, like, comment, that helps out loads with the algorithm. And if you follow me everywhere and you like the sound of what's going on here, you know, let me know. I'm always open to hearing from people. This is very new. I'm figuring it out as I go along. But there's tons more. Check out the other interviews. Follow me. Listen. Jump onto the live stream. Say hi. I'm a friendly dude, and I really appreciate you watching. So thank you so much. You're a fucking legend. Love ya. Peace. Bye.